He was a successful amateur and professional fighter, a pioneer in the mixed martial arts business, and owner of one of the most respected gyms in the country. He operates the Las Vegas Fight Capital Gym and is known in the boxing world as Saigon Skipper Kelp.
Welcome to Title Unboxed. With more than 40 years of experience in the fight game, our host, Doug Ward, will be covering every corner of the ring as we get comfortable between the ropes. We'll talk with both the lesser-knowns and the legends, discuss boxing's rich history and current state of the game. We'll also look at today's latest innovations, equipment breakdowns, and insights you won't uncover anywhere else. Join us now as we take a look inside Title Unboxed.
Skip, thanks for joining us on Title Unboxed.
I'm happy to be here.
This will be fun. I always enjoy talking with you. Let's start from the beginning. Your introduction to boxing was a little different in that you came through, you were in the martial arts, Taekwondo and Japanese karate, right?
Yeah, I was in the martial arts, judo, Japanese karate, Taekwondo, and I basically wanted to start boxing just to get better with my hands. I had no intention on making it a career, but things kind of just evolved, and at the time, UFC wasn't around, so there was no way to pursue martial arts any further than maybe being a B-level actor or something like that, you know. So as I got into boxing and realized how challenging it was, it really struck my interest.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in the 80s and 90s, more boxers came from the martial arts world than they do today. There was guys like, was it Troy Dorsey?
Troy Dorsey.
You remember him?
He's a tough little dude,
yeah.
Man. Yeah. Troy Dorsey used to come in head first, but he was so tough. His skill set as a boxer was moderate, but he was just so damn tough, man. And he beat a lot of people.
Yeah, just take a shot like nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why it was more popular back then. I do know, you know, I remember ESPN used to have their Friday night fights, and they'd switching back and forth between one week it'd be boxing, the next week it'd be kickboxing. I think it was just a little bit more prevalent back then, which is why you see some of the fighters transition from that world into boxing.
Well, so what happened in the whole kickboxing era, even the Muay Thai era, there was no money for it, you know, and if you're working just as hard as any professional athlete, more even so, and to realize, hey, I can compete and do this, and at the end of the day, I'm going to get just enough to pay for my camp. Yep. You know, that's discouraging. The money didn't really come into the fray with martial arts until the UFC was bought by Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, and then it became a viable career.
Yeah, game changer for sure. We'll get into that.
Game changer for sure.
You know, I want to talk about your amateur career a little bit. You had a successful amateur career, won a couple Golden Gloves titles, I believe, national titles. And also the Olympic Sports Festival, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So I started boxing when I was 12 years old, and I started just like the whole Troy Dorsey got. You know, I wanted to learn how to box because I was a martial artist, and it just evolved. I got it, and in martial arts, I could compete with kids my age in full contact. In boxing, I could do that. In martial arts, they didn't have full contact until you were 16. And they wouldn't allow me to do it when I was 12. So as I got into boxing and started competing, and literally when I got into boxing, I was a junior black belt and all that shit coming up. But when I got into boxing, I went to the Scorpion Gym in Colorado Springs, a little gym in the sticks.
Yep. And
I was a black belt. I thought I was the next Bruce Lee. I got in there with some of these little dudes and got my ass beat. I was like, man, I gotta learn this. And just in time, like anyone else starting boxing, you got to start at the bottom. You're going to take your bumps and bruises, but eventually, if you stick with it, you'll get better. And that intrigued me, and I got better and entered some national tournaments. I won the national silver gloves. That was my first real taste of achieving something on a national level. The national silver gloves at the time, that was the biggest national tournament, or the second biggest national tournament for junior. And I won the national silver gloves, and then. What year
did you win that?
The national silver gloves, that was, I want to say it was 1985 or 86.
85. Okay, yep.
Yeah, 85, I believe. Feels like another lifetime. It practically is, the 80s Time is flying.
Yeah,
But so I won the national silver gloves, and that gave me a taste of a national title. And after that, man, it was like the bug hit me, and that's all I ate, slept, and I was identified. My identity was Skipper the boxer. Now it wasn't Skipper the karate guy, and it started morphing into that. And then I went to one back in the day. It's different now in the amateurs. The amateurs, when you turn 16, I might be misstating this, but from my understanding, having the amateur program in my gym, when you turn 16, you're not thrown to the wolves just yet. You still fight kids who are relatively in your age bracket. But back in the day, once you turn 16, you fought everybody. You're elite. You're elite. Yeah. And so I remember my first national tournament. Well, back in the day, I know you remember this, Doug. There was before the internet, before all that shit came out, there was a magazine called Mouthpiece Boxing.
Yeah.
You remember Mouthpiece magazine?
I do, yeah.
Any fighter from back in the 80s and early 90s will remember this. Like, Mouthpiece Boxing was our internet, basically. So we would, as a young kid, just looking up to all the fighters that were on TV, ABC Wide World of Sports, we'd look into the Mouthpiece magazine and we'd see all the top fighters in your division, like, you name it, the top 10, top 20, and you see articles of them. And so my first national tournament as an open fighter, I studied and I knew every fighter that was in my division. You go to these tournaments and now they're right in front of you, like, holy shit, that's the guy, that's such and such, that's such and such. And it's kind of startling, but at the same time, you're like, wow, I'm fighting him. And I used to look at him in Mouthpiece magazine. But once you get over that initial discovery, then you realize, hey, I'm one of the big dogs too. And that was, I speak to a lot of my old amateur and professional friends, and they all kind of have the same story about relate the first person they saw from Mouthpiece magazine in real life that they had to fight.
It's a different deal now when you watch them on YouTube, become more familiar, that it's not that sudden, they're standing right in front of you.
Exactly. It was kind of like folklore, very cool. Yeah, I miss those old days for sure.
Yeah. There's a couple of names on your amateur ledger that I want to talk about just because they stand out. One of them's, you fought both of them in 1988. One was Maurice Brantley, because he's a local guy here.
Okay, okay.
And he used to train down at Eastside Boxing Gym, and I knew you fought him. Also, Todd Foster.
Todd Foster, yeah. So I fought Maurice Brantley in the National Golden Gloves, and that was probably, out of my whole amateur career, if you capsize into one event, that was probably the zenith of my amateur career. I just had an amazing run in the National Golden Gloves. I won the Outstanding Boxer that year. It was in 1988. And Maurice Brantley was one of my, I believe he might have been the first night. And he was just tough and strong, man. I was what are they feeding these guys out there? And it was a tough fight. And we ended up actually fighting again in the pros. Maurice and I fought as pros. It was like my 9th or 10th fight, something like that. And the irony here is, and most of the guys that, I came up with or fought opponents, we're friends on Facebook now. Like Bronco McCart, when we were in the pros, he put a shellacking on me, and he's a great guy. We're good friends now on social media. So, it's a small community, and I think we stick together because we all have this common journey that we all share. And Todd Foster, he was, man, I thought he was going to win the Olympics. We fought in the '88 Olympic box office semifinals, and he beat me. It was a close fight. Mm-hmm. But even, after a fight, if you won or lost. Yeah. And the fight was close. I had some friends saying, "Oh, you got robbed. And that's thank you for saying that." But after the fight, I felt, I didn't win this. It was close, but the better man that night won the fight. So, and Todd, I really, once again, a good friend. Well, not a good friend since, but good friends then. I really thought he was going to make a lot of noise in the pro ranks because he had a nasty right hand. That kid could punch that right hand.
If I remember, what held him back was he was so prone to getting cut and bleeding, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me tell you a funny story about Todd Box. Like back in the day, in the amateurs, you know, we go to training camp in Colorado Springs, and we're all in the dorms. And the training camps, you're literally getting fighters from all over the United States, kids from Montana, the country, kids from, you know, fighters from New York, Chicago, the big inner cities, California, you name it. It's literally a melting pot. And we all go to these camps and we stay at the dormitories. And it's like there's tension. You're staying in a camp with the person you're going to fight and their camp and all their people. And you can see these cliques, and everyone has a different, you know, every part of the country, people are different. You know, New York, they have their swag. Miami, they have their swag. Everyone's different. And you kind of rub elbows with each other and slowly turn into a little bit of everyone. It's really cool. But to give you an idea, Todd Fox is from Montana, right? So there's not, you know, there's no street hustles or anything going on like that. We get our per diem, right? When we get our per diem, that's every day we would do, you know, when you go to these camps and you're one of the elite fighters, you get money every day. The per diem is for eating or whatever you want to do with it. And at the time, it was like $25 or something like that.
Yeah.
Which in the 80s,
that was a lot.
You give a high school kid $25, you know, we'll go to the Citadel Mall and ball out a little bit. But when per diem comes, we'll all go into one of the rooms and we start shooting dice.
Oh, geez.
And the, you know, the kids from the inner city would teach us how to roll the dice. So Todd and I were there. I'm from Colorado Springs. He's from Montana. So we're shooting dice and we get addicted to this shit.
Oh, geez.
And so either you're coming up, you're doubling or tripling up your per diem money, or you're assed out. And then you got to, you know, humble yourself until the next day for per diem. But it was so funny because watching Todd play shoot craps with some of the other guys was some of my fondest memories ever. So I wish we had videos of that stuff like that back in the day.
Yeah, well, at least that got. Yeah, well, at least that got you ready for Vegas, you know.
It was perfect, right? It groomed me for my next journey in life. Absolutely. Yeah.
So then you turned pro, 1990 or 91?
91, I believe it was. After after the 88 Olympic trials, when I lost to Todd Foster in the semifinal, Top Rank had an amateur to pro program. And there were 3 boxers that they elected for that program. It was Frankie Pena, God rest his soul, he passed away in the early 2000s. Tony Gonzalez, who he joined the Marines, and I'm not quite sure what he's doing now, but he was he used to throw a lot of punches. And then it was myself. So we came to Las Vegas. We were sponsored by Top Rank in hopes that after we fought amateur, once we turned pro, we would turn pro with them. And all 3 of us actually did turn pro with them. So that was in 88. I moved to Las Vegas, did that program for a while. And then it just got to the point where ideally my class was the class of 1992. I should have, you know, I was groomed to stick around for the 92 Olympics. You know, whether I make it or not, we don't know, but that was the timeline. But, you know, when I was in Vegas, the lights, the glitz and glamour, they made me an offer to turn pro, and I turned pro. And I missed that 92 run, but I kind of got a jump start on all my predecessors that stuck around in 92. I wouldn't change a thing, but that's kind of how I turned pro. I came to Vegas and started rubbing elbows with the pros and some of the managers and this, that, and the other. And I signed with Top Rank and never left Vegas since. And it's been my home since 88, 89.
And you came up and your career kind of fell in a perfect, kind of a sweet spot for a couple of reasons. One, you're in Vegas, so you got the experience. You were fighting at, you know, Bally's, Sands, Caesar's Palace. I mean, that was kind of that was when Vegas was really hitting on all cylinders. Plus, you had the platform of not only ESPN Friday Night Fights, but a big one for you, the USA Tuesday Night Fights.
Yeah, I think that was such a big negative for boxing when Tuesday Night Fights went off.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Man, it gave guys like me, you know, Vinny Pazenza practically immortalized him, right? When he had broke his neck and they just showed the journey of him recovering. Tuesday Night Fights were amazing, and I miss a series like that, and that gave me a platform. And like you said, I fought in Las Vegas with top-ranked Thursday night fights.
Yeah.
So I knew back then. Call me biased. I'm old school, and when you're old school, you kind of lean toward your era all the time.
Sure.
But boxing hasn't been the same since.
Yeah.
You turn your TV on every Thursday, you're going to get ESPN fights. Every Tuesday, you were going to get the Tuesday night fights, and then you would get an ABC Wide World of Sports, and then on a Saturday you would get an HBO fight. And boxing was just banging. The gyms in Vegas. I trained at a top-ranked gym. And it was like a who's who of the boxing world back in the day. You could go to the Golden Glove gym. It was the same. Johnny Tacos was the same. It's not that anymore, you know. So now you only hear about the few elite guys, the Tank Davises of the world, the Terrence Crawfords, the Canelos. But back in the day, you would hear the dogs and the 10 guys chomping at his heels, you know. So hopefully there's a resurgence somewhere along the line and bring that magic back. But who knows? They need a Tuesday night fight kind of episode back.
They really do. Well, because of that, I tell everybody the 80s and 90s was the golden age of boxing because of network television, the Jerry Cooneys, the Sugar Ray Leonard, all those guys they were showcasing and Tuesday night fights. Plus, the cool thing about Tuesday night fights was, they had characters. They had, the punching postman, Tony Thornton. They had James Broad, who you don't forget his name because he was broad. He was the most out of shape looking heavyweight ever. But and Rockin' Robin Blake, one of my favorites. I mean, that kid was just a killer.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's the UFC is so ingenious with this. They make you interested in the fighters because they do promos on the fighters and backstories on the fighters. So now you have a vested interest into seeing what this person's going to do and how far they can go. And that's what Tuesday night fights did. They would do I'm speaking of Benny Pazenza when he broke his neck, and they chronicalized the whole journey of him recovering, rehabbing. I'll never forget when he had that neck brace on, when he had a broken neck, and they just showing him lifting weights. And if you were this much of a fight fan, it was impossible not to feel like, holy shit, this guy's going to do it. Totally. And those kind of stories draw people's interest, get them to tune into your fight, and that's how superstars are born. Well, another thing about the golden era of fighting, which we don't see anymore today or very little, the best weren't afraid to fight the best. If you beat me, we're going to run it back, and we're going to do it. These guys would fight multiple times, and on any given day, anyone could win the fight. If you're the best, run it back. Let's see who can win the majority of the fights. And all those trilogies, and that was amazing for boxing. Back in the Ali, Frazier days, trilogies were everything. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have that.
Well, then it gives people a chance to get accustomed to the fighters, It's like it was like 24/7 back in the day,
24/7, oh man. Yeah. 24/7 and Floyd Mayweather. Talk about the perfect storm, right?
Yeah, totally.
Man, that was and that created, Money May. Yeah, that was incredible, and we need things like that. Unfortunately, to do that, it costs money, and you need to have an organization, which it was HBO, to back that and to really invest. And that's the downside of boxing right now. No one's willing to really invest in that. I know Turk Al Haqiq from Saudi Arabia has the means, and I think he's putting a nice little infusion of energy into boxing, and we need that. That's what's needed.
I do want to talk about a couple fights specifically because, again, we talked about USA Boxing would build characters, and there's a couple of guys that stand out that you fought. One was James McCrary.
Who was that?
James McCrary. He was on.
Oh yeah.
James McCray. He was a regular on USA Boxing. You fought him in the pros.
I fought him
in '96. Did you not?
I may have.
I could be remembering wrong.
It was a lifetime ago.
I thought for sure you fought.
I think I did. I think I fought him in Mississippi or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't in Vegas. I know most of your fights were in Vegas or Arizona and around. Okay, I'll bring.
Very seldom did I fight outside of Vegas. I've never lost in Vegas. I should have kept my ass in Vegas.
Right. That would have been a telling thing. Yeah. Okay, so let me bring up one guy that I know you'll remember because you were the underdog going into it. USA Boxing they were hyping him as their guy, and it was a war. I think it was almost a contender for fight of the year, and that was against Adrian Stone.
Oh yeah.
I remember that fight. I remember watching that fight.
I was absolutely the B side to that one.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that, and it's ironically enough, he and I have reconnected on Facebook and we bust each other's balls and talk, and it's all great. But Adrian Stone.
Adrian Stone, yep. You had him down first round. Or he had you down the first round, didn't he?
So I came in, obviously I come into the fight thinking I'm gonna win the fight. So I didn't look at myself as the A side or B side. I was gonna win this fight. And but obviously, when you look at the scope of it, I was the B side. They were building Adrian up. He had some momentum going in. And so I remember this is the vivid in my memory. I had a bunch of friends. My trainer had his family. They're from back east. They came to the fight, and I remember meeting them. That as I'm walking to the locker room, I'm meeting them, and there's a whole bunch of them. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fight that up. And the first round, he dropped me. I went down, and all I remember, I don't remember getting hit. I just remember being on my ass. Yeah. It was a flash knockdown. I wasn't really on, really hurt or anything like that. It just, my lights went out. And when I was on my ass, all I thought about was, man, that's so embarrassing. I'm telling all these people how hard I trained. And I got up, and that stuck in my head for like a round and a half. And that kind of like motivated me and pissed me off to continue the fight. And we had a war. I ended up winning the fight. And that like I said, the National Golden Gloves in 1988 was the highlight of my amateur career. That was probably the highlight of my pro career.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I still remember it.
Yeah, it was a fun fight. It was very fan friendly, and I think we gave the fans what they were looking for, and that
definitely
did get nominated for Fight of the Year with Thursday Night Fights. Yeah, very fond memory there.
So let's talk about retirement and that transition. I know you had a couple title bids that you lost. One to Tony Martin. I don't remember the other one. The other one was earlier on.
Raul Marquez.
Raul Marquez, yeah. Oh, that's tough dude. He's a tough dude.
A great friend of mine as well. Jeez. We were like this in the amateurs, and we're still good friends now. So.
Yeah. But then you come back from those, and you beat Javier Mendes in 1998 at the Orleans Casino. Right. Why at that point did you go, off a win, did you go, I'm going to be done with this. I'm going to move on.
So it's a crazy story, Doug. So, and I was 27 when I had my last fight. I haven't even reached my physical peak.
Your peak.
And as a boxer, as now that I'm a student of the game and a teacher of the sweet science, my skill set was this when I was fighting. I was fast, I was strong, I was always in shape, and I had a nasty left hook. And I got by with that. And sometimes when people who are working with you, why broke what's fixed, right? Sure. And having that power was almost a curse in the sense that we never filled in the gaps. Mm-hmm. I never really mastered the art of defense. I didn't set people up. It's just so many things. Now, as a trainer, I look back like, man, I was basically elementary. Had I became a student of the game, who knows what would have happened. But back to what enticed me to retire after my last fight with Orleans. So I got cut at the last 10 seconds of the fight, and that cut allowed me time to sit back and reflect, thinking, do I want to make this run at it? And the answer was absolutely. I'm going to acquire these skills. I'm going to master the art of defense. I'm going to do my homework. I'm not just going to hit the gym, train hard, but when I'm done, I'm done. I'm going to hit the gym, train hard. I'm going to go study. I'm just going to be a student of the game. And one day, this was probably 3 weeks after that fight. I remember this like it was yesterday. I'm with my family, and I got 4 kids, my wife, and we're at Tony Romo's. It's like a barbecue, a barbecue plate. And I'm sitting there with my wife and kids, and I lost all my peripheral vision. Literally, I'm looking at my wife.
Oh,
like,
wow.
baby, I can't see my hand. And she thought I was fucking around. I said, I can't see my hand. And my peripheral, it just went, whoop. And that freaked me out. Freaked me out. That lasted for about 30 minutes. And after that, this is how stubborn and the Lord to want to fight is there. I still didn't concede that I'm not going to fight. I went to the MRIs and everything you can imagine, neurologists, and I went multiple times because I still felt like, okay, now I know what's needed to get to this next level. And they would tell me after seeing my results, they said, Skip, everything looks fine, but that doesn't mean the next punch, everything won't be fine.
Oh,
and that's one of those things where if I didn't have kids, I'm 53 right now. I'd probably still be fighting. You know what I mean? But having kids, it changes your perspective on life. And
and what's important.
And then, you know, even after that, I still trained, and I was like reaching to God, like, give me a sign. And not that wasn't enough He already gave me, but and every time in the back of my mind when I train, I drive home and say, do I have a headache? Nah, I don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you as a fighter, you can't think like that. That can't even be a thought.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to fight whatever happens, and learn the craft. And this is what I tell all the young fighters that come to my gym now and that I work with. I'm like, master the art of defense.
Yeah.
We throw thousands of punches every day, but how many reps do we put into actual defense?
Mm-hmm. And
I'm such a proponent of that right now because I think I took most of my damage in sparring sessions. And that was the ego thing, you know, and I think
that's everybody everywhere, I think.
That's everybody else, especially coming to Vegas when we're training at top-ranked gym, and every sparring session was like a war, especially with me. That was my style. When I was sparring, the ring would just, and everyone's watching because they know it's going to be a show at my expense, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know better. It's just your ego, like, I'm going to win all sparring sessions and, you know, knock people out. So stupid. And all you young fighters out there, if you're listening,
there you go.
Sparring isn't where, you know, that's to learn. You know, there are times when you got to put your foot on the gas in sparring. You got to get that experience, and, you know, nothing like real life combat, but get that defense and work on things when you spar. It's not the fight.
Yeah, amen. Thanks for that. That's good advice. I love that. And you know, another thing that I talk to young fighters about, and retired fighters like yourself, is making that transition from boxing. You got a life after boxing. How do you begin to build that? And you've been one of the few that have been really successful at it. And you went from there. I don't know what you did in the interim, but you actually built the UNLV boxing program to a pretty successful stature.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And that's what I tell the young kids here at boxing now. I said, boxing lasts this long in the scope of your life. It's really an opportunity more than a career. And what you do is you get and do as much as you can, commit everything you got to it, mind, body, and soul to that, because it's a small run. And then after that, you got to parlay that to something. I was fortunate when I was still fighting. I was training at this gym in Vegas called Las Vegas Sporting House. It was like the mecca of business transactions in Vegas at the time. All big business guys were training at the Sporting House. And I started, actually referee Richard Steele was training a whole bunch of executives. And he was in one of the racquetball rooms there at the Sporting House. And one day Richard was like, hey, Skip, I got to leave town. Can you train these people while I'm gone? And I was like, sure, I'll do anything for you, Richard. What do you want? And they all pay, and this was in like the early 90s, they all paid $50, like 10 people. And I was like, you mean I'm getting $50? Well, I was like, I'm in. And then I started working with them, and then Richard was getting more busy, and then basically it morphed to me taking over that class. And I built relationships with these guys, and they were prominent business people. And one of the gentlemen, I'll say his name because he's such an important part of my life where I'm at now. His name is Bruce Coburn from Coors of Las Vegas. He was the vice president of Coors of Las Vegas, and he had a son, and he wanted his son to box and go to school. So we started talking. We said, there is college boxing. It used to be back in the 60s, it was prominent. Not so much now because the guy passed away from head trauma back in the day. that happens in football, but with the stigma of boxing,
Yeah.
they shut it down.
They were gunning for it anyway.
They were gunning for it anyway.
Yeah.
So we put this. So boxing was a club sport, but it's still pretty prominent, especially in the military academies. So we put together the UNLV boxing team, and it was some of the funnest times of my life. We had a great run. We had great support by the university. We actually won a national title, and when we won the national team title, we were the first non-military academy to win like in 20 years. So that was great. And that spawned me opening up my gym and just networking in the community. And it's provided a good life for me after boxing. And that's what I tell all young fighters, like, be open to networking, because your network is your net worth. You know what I mean? And that's what I tell the kids now, and be open-minded. Use your boxing, get as much as you can out of it, put all you can into it, and then springboard it to something else, whatever that something else is. But you have to think like that.
Exactly. I think some of these guys in general, they figure they're indestructible, invincible, and don't think about there's going to be an end to this someday. I'm going to have to move on and do something else with boxing or outside of boxing.
Absolutely. Because the worst position to be in is when you're my age or even younger than me, but well beyond your prime, and you're still fighting. Because you have to fight. And that's, it's one thing to fight because you got these great opportunities and you're going to make this and that, but it's another thing to fight to try to start from building block number one to get back here where you can get to a point where you can make a decent living. And when you get beyond your prime and you're doing that, that's when it gets scary, because that's when most of the damage is done, if it hasn't already been done. And that's the decision. This isn't forever things.
Yeah, for sure. But then you used UNLV, your experience there, to kind of springboard you to something even bigger. So let's talk a little bit about the first MMA boxing gym, the first MMA gym in Las Vegas, and how you got kind of in bed with the JSEC Jiu-Jitsu and John Lewis.
Yeah. So John Lewis and I, back in the mid-'90s, I was the boxing guy and John was the jiu-jitsu guy. This was when the UFC first. I was the boxing guy around town, and John was the jiu-jitsu guy. And at the time, there wasn't a jiu-jitsu studio on every block.
Yeah.
UFC had just had that thing in '93, and Extreme Fights, all these MMA combat leagues were coming to fruition. And John and I ran into each other at some pizza place, and out of mutual respect, we both met each other and said, "Hey, yeah." And I wanted to learn jiu-jitsu at the time because I did taekwondo, judo, Japanese karate. I did all that, but jiu-jitsu was like, holy shit, this thing really exists. And this little guy, Horace Gracie at the time, just choking out all these people. I need to learn that. And so John came to me because he was competing and he wanted to learn how to box. He needed to get his hands
stand up. Yeah.
Stand up. And I wanted to learn jiu-jitsu. So we naturally came together and traded off our time. And then it morphed into me becoming his trainer and start teaching other MMA guys and jiu-jitsu guys. And then there was an opportunity to get this big facility across the street from the training facility we had. So we went into partners together. It was the first mixed martial arts gym in the state of Nevada. And at the time, like now, it back then it didn't seem like anything, but we would have like Chuck Liddell, Rampage Jackson, Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz, BJ Penn, Kevin Randleman, all these guys on one mat, one session. And after it was over, it was like, all right, guys, pick up your shit, clean it up. See you later. See you tomorrow. It was crazy how this was the mecca for everyone. Now everyone has a gym and it spawned and grew, and the UFC is what it is today. But there was a time when this was the home to all of it. And
had no idea that it was going to spawn something of the magnitude that the UFC and mixed martial arts has become.
I don't think anybody did, right? And even if it went 20 levels less than what it is now, it'd still be amazing.
Yeah.
Now it's just, one of the biggest sports in the world. It's incredible.
So at what point did John, he decided he wanted to, pursue acting or do some other things, and he kind of passed the JSEC off to you, and you changed the name because you wanted it to reflect all of the martial arts, including boxing.
Exactly. So
that happened?
So I want to say it was about 2010, 2011, somewhere in that area. John, John was the jack of all trades. That guy, and at high levels too.
Yeah.
Club promoted. He did marketing. He was acting. He was writing scripts. He was producing. So John wanted to he go to LA and pursue that. And in doing so, he was like, Skip, I'm going, because there were some times when at that time the gym wasn't as profitable, because one thing about having a gym when you're in the industry, yeah, you could train in my gym. Everyone wants to train in your gym, but nobody wants to pay a fee.
It's all
you know
free,
what I mean?
yeah.
And so you have a packed house, but you're not making any money. So we'd have to pay some bills. And John was in LA and was like, Skip, if you want, you take over the bills and I'm going to do my thing. And I was like, absolutely, John, I'll do that. Good luck in pursuing your dreams. And then when I took over the gym, like you said, we rebranded it to the Fight Capital, so it's inclusive for everyone and just a broader spectrum of a person that didn't know anything about it could read Fight Capital and kind of, wrap their head around what's going on here. And then I turned it from just all my meathead fighting friends come and train for free to mom, dad, son, daughter, you name it. You guys want to learn self-defense. You want to get in shape. Whatever it is you want to do, you want to gain confidence. You want to learn a particular art. You want to be a fighter. So we opened up for everything like that. And then membership started picking up. And I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And to this day, it's like that. We have some of the baddest fighters train here. And then we have people that could give two shits about fighting. They just want to get in shape and learn how to throw a 1-2. So there's a little bit for everyone.
But you have to have that element to be a successful boxing gym, because A, boxers don't have money, most of them.
Right.
And B, you just need that clientele. You need that kind of mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it gives you credibility, right? I think a lot of people that don't want to be fighters, it's cool to train. And then all of a sudden you look over there and you see, we've had some of the top fighters train here. Canelo's trained here before, Ryan Garcia, Earl Spence. And, you see them and you're like, ooh, it heightens the experience for you. So, I'll never get away from that. And we have one of the biggest things we're doing now is we have a Fighting for the Future Foundation here. And so what we do is we have kids. Our motto is we're never going to have a kid not sign up because of money, right? And the area where our gym is, it's a economically distressed area. And so any kid in this community, or any community for that matter, if they want to train here and maybe they can't afford it or times are rough or whatever, they're going to train. We're going to put them on a scholarship. And
that's great.
We don't turn any kid away. The only caveat to that is if they choose to be part of our youth program, they have to commit. They have to be here. And then 2 days a week, we have a mental development coach. She's a psychiatrist in youth development, and twice a week they have to get with her, and she does multiple things. She talks about life strategies, about coping with certain situations at home or in school or whatever it may be, and then we're there to tutor them as well. So if they're coming and they're going to be under our scholarship, they have to be involved in that, which is a plus. It's so beneficial. So so that's going to be the mark. My mark in this gym in the future is going to be the Fighting for the Future Foundation, because it's one of those things where all my instructors and my my staff here, they all get behind it. Next week, we're actually doing a back to school drive. We're going to give away backpacks and school supplies and things like that. That's just that feel good thing. And we've partnered up with the UFC and the Las Vegas Police Department. So they give their resources out and their time and money. And it's just an amazing collaboration. And that's what I wake up for.
That is great. Yeah. Awesome. So let's talk about from the beginning. You were there from the beginning. What the groundswell with MMA surround the excitement and the early success of MMA and UFC. What do you think drove that?
I think the whole idea, at least for me, right, when because forever, and I know Dana White said this before, and I'll just kind of paraphrase it, forever, growing up, at least for me in the 80s with the whole Bruce Lee and whatnot, and you too, I'm sure, like, what style is the best? And all these Bruce Lee movies, like Chinese Kung Fu would beat Japanese Kung Fu. The UFC was a platform where that question could be answered. And that was so intriguing. And I think, even with that, it never really took off because they didn't have the people behind it, Dana White and the Fertittas, to really turn it into what it is.
The right formula.
The formula, but they had the nuts and bolts. And if they could just put that in a proper package, which they did, then you would get what we have now. And that's the fastest growing sport in the world.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, again, who could have seen that coming?
Who could have seen that coming?
Yeah.
And it's just, if you've never been to a live UFC event, there's nothing like it. They focus on the fan experience. And I'm still an OG. You're an OG. We go to boxing matches, and nothing's like that main event, the big fight. I was at Tyson Holyfield, and to this day, that will go down as the most adrenaline I ever felt in an event ever. Tyson Holyfield too, right? And but the UFC, they duplicate that feeling every event. I don't care who's on the card. Just the way they have this machine, you get in the audience, and you're like, oh, it's pretty stellar. And then their production level is on a whole nother universe than boxing. HBO used to do a great job with their production, but UFC, even their smallest shows, their production value is incredible. So they've surpassed boxing in that respect, and they're not looking back.
Well,
also,
maybe
story, and this is how I'm so tight with the UFC. I'm sure we'll get to this, but John Lewis, and Dana's told this story multiple times. The Dana was with close friends with the Fertittas, and they were going to get into promoting boxing at the time because Lorenzo Fertitta was on the athletic commission, and Dana he was with the Fertittas, and he ran into John Lewis at the Hard Rock Casino back in the day, and John was a jiu-jitsu guy, so they struck up a conversation, and then John started training them, and they got hooked on it. First of all, if you've never done jiu-jitsu before, if you do it for the first time, it alters your world, especially a person like us where we've been in the combat world forever. And back in the day, you would think, oh, if you grab me, I'm going to knock you out, whatever. You get a guy that's capable in jiu-jitsu and you know nothing, and they take you to the ground, you are absolutely helpless. You're done. And that intrigue right there is one of those things, I got to learn this. And that was the revelation that Dana had, and he really got into jiu-jitsu, him and Fertittas, and when they got into jiu-jitsu, this story's all over, so I won't tell how, they bought it, blew it up, but that is what happened. And then one day, this was after the UFC was taken off. Dana White was Dana White. He was the man. Dana reached out to John Lewis, and Dana's a huge Boston Celtic fan. So at the time, Glenn Big Baby Davis, he was a Boston Celtic, he wanted to learn jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts. So Dana called John and said, hey, John, can you teach Big Baby some MMA, some jiu-jitsu? And John was like, of course. So John was training him, and then John came back to me and was like, Skip, that motherfucker's big. You want to help me train him? Do some striking in between? And I was like, absolutely, I'll come train. So we were going to Dana's gym at the time, the old UFC office, and we were training, and one day Dana came in when I just finished training Big Baby. And, Dana and I have known each other since the 90s in the box, because the boxing world was small back then, right? And we struck up a conversation like, yeah, how you been? And then Dana I said, you train anymore, Dana? He goes, no, but I need to. And I was like, hit me up. And then a couple weeks later, he hit me up and wanted to start training. So I started training him, and then he asked me, he said, hey, do you travel? Will you travel and train? I was like, absolutely. And then I started going on trips with him, training him, and that's how my relationship with Dana spawned, and we're really good friends right now. And once again, through boxing, networking is gotten me where I'm at. So
and Dana, he can fight a little bit.
I'm telling you. So there was a time when him and Tito Ortiz were actually going to box. People think it's bullshit. It's absolutely real. They were going to box. Dana would have put hands on him. Yeah. And I had my heavyweights from the UNLV boxing team going to Dana's gym to spar. And we're talking full out sparring. So I knew if Dana could spar with these guys, he's legit. He's gonna mess Tito. And for Tito, he had nothing to gain, right? Either you beat up your boss, who's not a fighter, or you get your ass beat by your boss. So Tito did the smart thing and avoided that conflict. Yeah, but it would have been bad for him.
I've seen him spar at least twice down in the basement of the old UFC offices, and he was putting it on a couple of amateur guys pretty well that were pretty well respected and had some good skills.
Oh, and to this day, I think his claim to fame is his liver hook to the body. He likes to put guys down with that. So yeah. Pretty funny. Yeah, but he can get down.
Yeah. Maybe you've answered this, but I know in the beginning of when UFC kind of started taking off, people were like, boxing's dead. UFC's the next generation. What do you think boxing could learn and do differently to kind of compete at that level and kind of just do better, to evolve?
Well, I think you almost have to look at the UFC and build a model like that, because boxing's so fragmented. You got all these jurisdictions and organizations, and one conflicts the other, and you can't get the best guys to fight each other. To get the two best guys to fight each other, it's impossible. And that's where the fans come up short, right? The fans have to guess. All right, he's better. In the UFC, you get all the guys in the division. At the end of the day, you're going to find out who's the king of the mountain. And boxing, you don't have. And it's frustrating. You know, it's frustrating to watch this guy dominate this side and this guy, and they never fight each other. Now we have
frustrating
to
for the fans,
exactly. Or if they fight, it's well past the prime when no one really gives a shit anymore. And that's what they need to see. People in boxing, they don't understand. They say UFC doesn't pay their fighters. Everyone on the UFC gets paid. And just like in life, in capitalism, if you're elite, if you're good, you're going to make big money. If you're not in the UFC, you're still making a living. In boxing, I have fighters in my gym who have great records, ranked in the top 20. These poor kids are barely getting by. You know, and it's a shame. They fight once or twice a year, if that. And when they fight, they're making less than $10,000. It blows my mind. So there's nothing there. And boxing has no infrastructure. It needs the infrastructure. And all this crap about boxers make all this money. No, a few boxers make all this money. All the other boxers are starving. Now, to some level, that's kind of how the sport of fighting is. You're nothing financially until you're everything. But what the UFC has done, it's provided a platform, a career where you're eating until you blow up. And if you don't blow up, it's just like any other job. Not everyone's the multimillionaire. You know, you have to be really, really good at what you do to reap the rewards. But, you know, you can go down the list of 20 UFC fighters and have these kids walk through the airport. They're going to be recognized. The UFC fighters that are on the prelims are recognized because they live in this bubble where the UFC promotes them and puts them out there. Boxing, if it's not the top dogs, these guys are obscure. So they have no other means to make money. These UFC fighters are doing appearances and sponsorships and this, that, and the other. The boxing needs that. It needs one organization to run it. And that organization, and then everyone, let's find out who's the best. Let's make the best fights happen. Let's have an actual, you know, number one contender, number two contender. Let's see where this is at, because people like to follow that. When they can follow that and track it, now there's interest. Now I'm gonna tune in to see who's gonna beat who and who's gonna get to the pinnacle. You know, will that ever happen? I don't know. You know, Turk Al-Sheikh is putting a lot of money behind it. And, you know, someone like him has the ability to form that kind of organization. But it's gonna cut out all the conflict between this promoter and that promoter. And if all the promoters could get together and figure it out, maybe that's the compromise, but that won't happen. That doesn't happen.
Not going to happen. So. Plus in boxing, if you lose, you're kind of relegated to the back of the line, where in MMA, it's not that way. You know, it's about putting butts in seats. If you're still an attractive fighter, you still have a certain skill set and you can compete, you're still in contention. You're still in the mix.
That's another thing that, you know, kind of put a stain on boxing, this whole thing about you got to be undefeated. Protecting that zero, a lot of times comes with not taking any risk. You know, I go back to the Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, Duran days. Those guys just threw each other in the pot, and they all fought each other, and they're legendary. And no one's going to look back on history and say those guys weren't some of the baddest guys that ever walked the face of the earth in the boxing ring. You know what I mean? So yeah, that needs to go. You should be rewarded on your efforts and your skills, not that record.
Yeah,
You know,
the guys back then, they wanted the challenge. I mean, Ray Leonard's talked about that. He said, I lived for that. I lived for that, living on the edge, you know, testing myself.
That was so, and that the fans love that, right? Nothing's worse than an undefeated guy, and there's an animal staring staring at you in your same division.
Yep.
All right, let's see who's the king of the mountain. Let's see.
Yeah.
I miss those days. You know, we don't have that no more because everyone's afraid to lose that. Oh, and that needs to change. That's dead.
Well, and again, maybe we just covered it, but you know, having been in boxing since the early 90s all the way through till now, been in the game, in the world, in the gym with the fighters, seeing these guys, interacting with them face to face, close up. You know, how has boxing changed, specifically in Vegas? Because it's definitely a different environment, a different landscape. But from your perspective, how's it really changed, and where's it at?
Back in my day, in our day, name an amateur fighter now. You can't. There was an amateur breeding ground, and this was a platform where these kids, this is how you learn. You perfect your craft. You start and you learn, you get better. The amateur programs are not strong right now. Not strong right now. We live in Las Vegas, the boxing capital of the world. There should be an amateur fight almost every week. It shouldn't be hard for kids to get fights. And you know, following people through the nationals and the regionals, the nationals, and now they have all-comer tournaments, like a national tournament where anyone can just come. That's dangerous because now you get kids that really aren't that good fighting against the best. Back in the day,
coaches that don't know better. I'm amazed when a coach tells me, "I've got a kid, I got to fight. He wants his first fight. Can we do it in this national tournament, that national tournament?" I'm like, "Whoa, dude!"
Yeah, exactly, and that's dangerous. And
scary.
And it's a shame that anyone feels that they can be a coach, can be a trainer, because stuff like that happens, and kids will get hurt. Yeah. You know, it needs to be. We need capable trainers that guide these kids properly, and they need a structure, a ladder structure. You're a beginner, you don't go to national tournaments. Yeah. And the way to fix that is you have these state tournaments, regional tournaments, and national tournaments, and then you kind of get weeded out before you get to the big leagues. And there's always going to be, you know, some regions that are weaker than others. That's just the nature of the beast. But at least you've gone through those steps. You know, boxing just isn't as prevalent and prominent as it used to be in the 90s out here, man. And some of that has to do with mixed martial arts, but still, just from a pure boxing standpoint, man, when I was a pro back in the 90s, and I sound like the old guys that's hating the new generation, nothing like that. There's still great guys for sure. Yeah. But it's just the depth of good fighters isn't there like it used to be. Yeah. Well,
fight capital is still happening.
Fight capital is still happening. Fighting for the Future Foundation. And we might get superstars coming out of here.
I hope so. Vegas needs it. Boxing needs it, you know?
Yes, it does. And that's not our objective. Our objective is superstar human beings. But that would definitely help change the lives of some people if we can produce a couple of those. So.
Part of the process.
Yeah.
Well, look, I always enjoy talking with you. I knew this was going to be a good conversation. As we wrap up here, I know you do some boxing tutorials on some of your social channels, which I love. They're nice, short, sweet, concise, easy to understand, easy to follow, well delivered. Can you tell our audience and explain some of your social channels and where they can find you and follow you and look up some of this advice?
Absolutely. On Instagram at Skipper Kelp, Facebook Skipper Kelp, and my YouTube channel at Skipper Kelp. I'm just spreading the knowledge now. You know, it's probably, do I still want to fight if I could? Absolutely, but I'm not, and I never will. And this is kind of my way of letting that out and spread the sweet science to everyone, because boxing is transformed into a worldwide thing where it's not just for people who want to be the toughest, baddest guy on the planet. It's for everyone, and that's what I'm doing. I'm giving out instructionals. They're clear, concise, and they're short, and I think anyone can learn from it. And check it out. Follow me.
Well, what you're doing at the gym, what you're doing on social is a great way to give back, and I love that about you. You're just all about the sport and doing what you can to return it to its greatness.
I appreciate you, Doug. You always help out the gym. Well, our gym is probably 90% title, so we'll keep it that way forever.
I don't hate it.
Thank you, Doug. It's always a pleasure.
Great info. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
Thank you for watching this episode of Title Unboxed. If you're anything like me, you can never get too much boxing. So if you'd like to watch more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on our Title Boxing YouTube page.